Distinguished guests, fellow students, the fourth lecture of the Zhejiang University Growth Forum now begins. Zhejiang University is an institution rich honor and pride. Within this legacy is the work of generations of Zhejiang University and Kyushu students. It shows Zhejiang University's broad-mindedness. Zhejiang University, the sea embraces all rivers. Therefore, our Growth Forum is held with an open mind and lofty, far-reaching ideals. We held humanities lectures consecutively. Today, we are very fortunate to have invited Khenpo Sodargye. He is a Dharma master who shines in each of our hearts like the sun. Let us now welcome Khenpo Sodargye to the stage. Let us welcome Professor Zhang Jiachen, Executive Director of the Buddhist Studies Center at Zhejiang University, to introduce Khenpo Sodargye.
It is a great honor for me to introduce the esteemed Khenpo. Khenpo Sodargye is the Chief Khenpo of the Chinese Sangha Department at Larunga Buddhist Academy. The term Khenpo is not familiar in Han regions. Let me briefly explain. Khenpo is a title. It refers to a Lama in Tibetan Buddhism who is deeply versed in the scriptures, someone serving in a monastery, or the head of a monastic college in the monastery, Buddhist abbot. They are called Khenpo. Generally speaking, to become a Khenpo truly requires exceptional knowledge and virtue. Khenpo Sodargye is highly renowned both in China and abroad. He is versed in 5 great treatises of Tibetan Buddhism, and he is also a prolific author with dozens of published works to his name. His works have tens of millions of words. Khenpo Sodargye followed Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche to spread the Dharma in the United States, Canada, France, Germany, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, Japan. Dharma in India, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia, Bhutan, Nepal. He was named spiritual advisor for the Larunga Center in New York. Khenpo utilizes modern internet technology to share Mahayana Buddhism. In terms of charitable work, Khenpo Sodargye launched the Initiate Love campaign in 2007, calling on Buddhists to protect animals and also to care for the people around them. He leads by example in both words and actions, established wisdom, compassion school, Buddhist centers, novice academies in Tibet. He helped students who couldn't study. He created scholarships in secondary schools. He has helped patients without means for medical treatment. He has attended the World Charity Conference held at the Great Hall of the People twice. Recent years, Khenpo lectured universities, Peking University, Tsinghua University, Fudan University, Nanjing University, and with teachers and students in the university, in-depth exchanges with university members at these universities. That concludes my introduction. Thank you.
Next, with the utmost respect in our hearts, let us most warmly welcome Khenpo Sodargye Rinpoche to deliver his teaching.
Just a moment ago, I was having a conversation with several distinguished professors from Zhejiang University. And during our conversation, I felt it was truly special. There were also many profound insights shared. I myself come from an altitude of over 4,000 meters from the snowy Tibetan plateau, and I am just an ordinary monk. A long time ago, I had already heard the famous saying, above there is heaven, below there are Suzhou and Hangzhou. I wanted to visit and found it quite fascinating. Later, through various circumstances, I have come to Hangzhou several times, especially this time coming to Zhejiang University, beautifully situated right next to the scenic and famous West Lake. A university like this truly makes people feel genuinely comfortable, welcomed, and delighted. I think truly here, whether you are working or studying, for example, it's all a kind of blessing and also a kind of enjoyment. But I think when we ourselves are truly enjoying such good fortune, even if just for a moment, we should also think of those around us who may not have these opportunities, and even those people in remote areas who do not have the opportunity to study. They matter and cannot be ignored, because in recent years, when the conditions have been just right, I have also visited some of the country's top universities with both hardware and software facilities of the highest standard. Also with some professors, scholars, and students covering a wide range of topics. At the same time, I have also visited some very remote schools in both Tibetan and Han regions. Especially, I visited some schools with extremely poor, very challenging and difficult conditions. Their educational facilities and school buildings are in particular quite noticeably underdeveloped. The students there, as well as the quality of teaching, are quite lacking. Some time ago, I visited a primary school. During cordyceps season in Tibet, many students go up into the mountains to dig for cordyceps instead of learning in school. In one school, there were only 7 or 8 primary school students playing in the classroom. There were also 7 or 8 teachers, but they were at one teacher's house playing mahjong and drinking alcohol. After seeing the situation at this school, I felt a deep sense of sadness. So sometimes we should compare higher education institutions with some schools, particularly those in less developed areas, are in particular worth comparing. We should develop a sense of compassion for the poor, the elderly, the weak, the sick, and the disabled around us. Today, I think the topic we are in fact discussing here mainly concerns the union of wisdom and compassion, the modern significance of Mahayana Buddhism. We need to elevate this caring approach. What I would like to do today is to take a moment to share with everyone here the main content that I think there may actually be a few people who perhaps do not know what Mahayana Buddhism is. First, I will use simple Buddhist terms to explain this concept. Of course, there are many different ways to explain Mahayana and Hinayana, but at the most fundamental level, what is so-called Mahayana Buddhism? It is to help all humans and even all sentient beings unconditionally and selflessly. This is the doctrine Mahayana Buddhism. Hinayana Buddhism, on the other hand, is about seeking liberation with a mindset focused on personal benefit. Such a teaching. So today, why in particular do we talk about Mahayana Buddhism right now? Because it plays a very important and significant role in both modern society and our daily lives, having a profound impact on the way we live, work, and interact with others each day. The difference between Mahayana and Hinayana, the particularly renowned and highly respected Indian Buddhist scholar Atisha, he said the distinction between non-Buddhists and Buddhists is made by taking refuge. Mahayana versus Hinayana motivation. What kind? The main difference between Mahayana and Hinayana, is there a distinction based on whether one has bodhicitta? Those who have bodhicitta belong to the Mahayana. Those without bodhicitta are not Mahayana. Therefore, I think that among those present, some teachers and some students should already have some understanding of the basic teachings of Buddhism, especially those from the Department of Religious Studies. The most crucial and important topics are ones that you must and certainly will master. So what benefits or positive contributions does the doctrine of Mahayana Buddhism bring to society? I remember in the 1970s and 80s, whether it was in Han Chinese areas or Tibetan areas, people would often say repeatedly and earnestly, serve the people wholeheartedly. Actually, this slogan was primarily directed toward human beings. But if we broaden it a bit further to encompass all sentient beings and strive to serve all sentient beings wholeheartedly, then that is precisely the doctrine of Mahayana Buddhism. Therefore, among our intellectuals and people in academic circles, generally speaking, nowadays there are those who are not very familiar with Buddhist teachings, and some even harbor doubts or skepticism. Some even develop prejudices or hold mistaken views, and a few go so far as to slander Buddhism. Such phenomena also exist. Of course, when it comes to religious belief, it has always been a matter of personal freedom, whether from a policy perspective or from the teachings of Buddhism itself. Even during the Buddha's lifetime, there were quite a few people who did not believe in Buddhism. So as a monastic, as a Buddhist in my daily life, I do not force anyone to believe in Buddhism, nor would I ever force someone to become a Buddhist monk or nun. We must make it clear to everyone that Buddhism is neither dogmatic nor passive. It is something that must be deeply understood. It is a religion that completely and clearly expounds the truth. To speak of a truth, I believe human society has entered the 21st century, an era which people are actively pursuing truth. Such a truth is like what people say about pure gold, it is not afraid of being destroyed by fire. In the same way, truth can withstand the test of history, and it can also stand up to rational and logical scrutiny. Therefore, as Buddhists, if we are Buddhists, we should take the fundamental teachings of Buddhism. I particularly hope to engage in exchanges and communication with many people from intellectual circles. As teachers and students of a school ourselves, each day the dissemination of culture and academic exchange are indispensable. This is also the trend that is expected to guide and shape the future development of all humanity, influencing the direction. So today, now, as we gather here, personally, I think it is truly very meaningful and important for everyone to discuss these valuable teachings together. In other words, when it comes down to it, Mahayana Buddhism just as the Buddha himself once said in the Avatamsaka Sutra, not seeking comfort for oneself, but wishing that all sentient beings be freed from suffering. It's extremely crucial in all aspects and levels of our current society, or rather among all social strata. If we possess such a sense of nobility, if we are nourished by this kind of spiritual elixir, I truly believe humanity will be peaceful, our society will be harmonious, and the nation will be stable. It's worth noting, not everyone should desperately pursue only their own personal status, material wealth, and power, and so on. If everyone only thinks just of themselves and seeks their own interests without much concern or caring about our whole society as a whole or about other people, then this society, this country, this nation will all head toward decline and may even perish. So as for myself, personally speaking, from my own experience, after many years, it can be said that I racked my brains and tried my best to contemplating, deeply studying, and carefully reflecting on the teachings of Buddhism. Over such a long period of time, the more I carefully observed and thoughtfully explored the world around me, the more I truly became unwaveringly convinced of the truth of Buddhism. A kind of faith arose in me that is hard to express in words. I believe that this kind of faith can arise in anyone. Today, as I share with you here, I truly hope you can in some way connect with this based on your own feelings. I recommend this especially to the intellectuals among us. Some of you may have already explored and studied the teachings of Buddhism for many years, while some may not have done so. But I hope that each of us will use our own wisdom to analyze what exactly the Buddha said over 2,500 years ago. The truth spoken by the Buddha, why is it that throughout the vicissitudes and the storms of history, it has never regressed because of any worldly culture and has never been overthrown? Why have their values continued to shine brilliantly throughout human history? So today it is not really because I am a Buddhist, like an old lady selling watermelons who praises her watermelons as beautiful and sweet. It's not like that. We should carefully and thoroughly analyze this from a very fair and objective standpoint. Over such a long period of time, truly, I myself have also read many valuable books from both ancient and modern times, from China and abroad. I've also come into contact in our society with people contributing to human society, such as scientists, writers, teachers, and intellectuals. I've spoken with them, and I've always felt that the altruistic philosophy of Buddhism is indeed truly and absolutely indispensable into this society. The truths that the Buddha left for everyone truly so many years ago are actually what people have been pursuing all along. Yet, a great many people have not reached this level. I once read about an American physicist, Capra. In one of Capra's books, he actually mentioned that nowadays human culture has made progress through our own efforts and exploration, but human wisdom, in fact, it essentially has not advanced beyond the level reached more than 2,500 years ago. remarkable. He said many concepts of the microcosmic world and tiny particles coincide with the principles Buddha spoke of in the Avatamsaka Sutra. He found this to be extremely rare and remarkable. From this statement, we can see that indeed many of our ideas have not made significant progress even now. Why do I say this? For example, when Shakyamuni Buddha entered Parinirvana in 543 BCE, the teachings the Buddha gave during his lifetime, including our current views on peace, our modern views on equality, virtues, and goodness of the human mind. These are things that people have always been pursuing. Throughout various dynasties, periods, and eras, humanity has been seeking these ideals. In fact, what kind of level should we have reached by now? You can open the Mahayana Sutras or carefully examine the history of humanity. We can make comparisons, and those with wisdom should be able to understand this quite easily. So we also very much hope that many university students and teachers, if you yourself are interested, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have faith. We'll explore these topics from an academic and cultural perspective. During this process of exploration, perhaps during the course of your life, it may bring you some unprecedented benefit. Perhaps by relying on a few specific scriptures or the teachings of a few particular Dharma teachers, you may experience meaningful changes in your life, changes to a certain degree. If we are equipped with one field of knowledge or limited to a single field of study, when we actually enter society and face real life and all kinds of social pressures, people can truly be said to be powerless, even extremely fragile. I have also met many university students. University students are indeed different from those in other schools. They enjoy a certain level of freedom on campus. Moreover, university is a very crucial stage. You are about to step into society, about to start interacting with others. It is essential to develop strong willpower, but now in many schools, as students keep studying, when they actually enter society, they often find themselves lacking the ability to cope with life. At this time, I think the altruistic mind and the sense of equality in Buddhism are extremely important. If you possess these qualities, you could say that in your own life you should have the courage to survive. So I often feel from the bottom of my heart that nowadays many intellectuals inevitably turn to study Buddhism, especially the selfless ideals of Mahayana Buddhism. The Buddha spoke about this in many sutras. So what exactly did he teach? He prized compassion, called great compassion. If we lack this kind of compassion in our current society, indeed many things are in fact based on the self and on the idea of protecting one's own personal interests. As a result, what we ultimately get is inequality, injustice, and unhappiness. Therefore, we should always cultivate an altruistic mindset, both in our thoughts and actions, for the well-being of others. In the Dashabhumivasha Shastra, it states there are those who benefit themselves, those who benefit others, those who benefit both, and those who benefit neither. Among them, those who benefit both themselves and others are the ones who actually practice loving kindness and genuine compassion to help and support other people, bringing positive outcomes to everyone involved. Such individuals are often considered the most outstanding among us. Therefore, in society, we often talk about this as well. Kind people who like to help others, they worry first, rejoice last. In fact, traditional Chinese culture is rich with such virtues. However, nowadays, many people truly struggle to find traces of these values in daily life. Every day, people blindly pursue money and status. They talk about success, development, peace, and so on. But in reality, everyone is immersed in afflictions and suffering. At this time, I feel that Buddhism concept of no self and the concept of impermanence are truly the fundamental causes and conditions for dispelling your afflictions and pain. The great Buddha also said in the sacred Avatamsaka Sutra, just as the medicine called Jatamansi can neutralize all poisons. Jatamansi medicine can neutralize all poisons. The Dharma is also like this, eliminating all afflictions and troubles. The Dharma is exactly like the Jatamansi medicine. It can eliminate afflictions like greed, anger, and ignorance, as well as the various sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death within the cycle of samsara. In fact, whether someone is wealthy, holds a high status, or is a wise and talented person, in the end, everyone has to face the major issue of life and death. When you are confronted with the problem of life and death, no amount of worldly wealth or glory can truly save you, not even from your fate. We all know all too well what some people around us are like when they fall ill, what it is like when someone leaves this world. So sometimes when I look at humanity, I see a deep confusion. Why is that? Life in the grand scheme of things, life is just a few short decades. Yet in reality, we become blindly attached, blindly greedy. What do we really gain from it? The more attached you are, the more you suffer and the less you gain. We should adopt an attitude of going with the flow, being relaxed, carefree, and at ease. With this kind of mindset, everything you do will likely turn out well. Even if things don't turn out perfectly in the end, in fact, we could say that it's also left to chance. And for you, and it's simply a matter of fate. So the teachings that have been passed down to us over the ages by the greatly compassionate Buddha are something we should sometimes contemplate and try to understand. In the process of understanding, you may indeed find that many unexpected benefits are within easy reach. In fact, in our daily lives, there is a very simple practice in Mahayana Buddhism, a very simple conceptive, contemplative practice on it. After practice over time, you will notice changes in your life. For example, the Mahayana text, 7 Points of Mind Training. Within the 7-point mind training, there are also numerous techniques for cultivating the mind. Take, for instance, the great compassion that we often talk about. Great compassion needs to arise within a person's mental continuum. Perhaps some of you here think, I should already possess great compassion. But in reality, it's not easy to possess great compassion. Compassion is often limited to relatives. When you see some people with disabilities, you might also feel a sense of compassion. But this is not true great compassion. True great compassion is having a heart for all sentient beings in the world, boundless and without exception. It is a compassion that is exactly like the one you have for your own parent. For example, imagine your elderly mother is blind, mentally unstable, and suffering from various illnesses, with no one to guide her, completely alone, and without any help or support. she is on the verge of falling off a cliff. At this moment, generally speaking, a filial and a wise person would go to save her. If you don't save her, it would be indefensible, even in the eyes of the world. In the same way, in our world, any sentient being with life at all, when they have lost all the eyes of true wisdom and have become intoxicated by the wine of ignorance and delusion, turning mentally unstable, frenzied, and confused without the guidance of a spiritual teacher, they fall from the cliff of samsara into the abyss of the lower realm. This is an extremely terrifying and dangerous situation. At this moment, are you willing to save these sentient beings? If you are willing to save them, to do so unconditionally, then at that time you possess a heart of great compassion. But this is very difficult. That's why many of us make boasts, including us Buddhists. I have compassion now. But in reality, this compassion truly isn't easy to attain. If you have such a heart toward all boundless living beings, this is what is called compassion. This kind of compassion, as the great Indian master Chandrakirti once said, at the beginning, this compassion acts as the sprouting force for the seed of bodhicitta. Later on, the water of great compassion keeps the seed of bodhicitta from withering. It helps it flourish. And in the end, great compassion for the sake of sentient beings to be guided, manifesting the Sambhogakaya and Nirmanakaya, having this kind of function. So in fact, great compassion is indeed very important. It is essential in our lives for everyone. If those of you present here have some interest in Mahayana Buddhism, I think it would be really good for everyone to actually practice some Dharma in your daily life. What kind of Dharma should we practice? It is our bodhicitta. Even if bodhicitta arises in your mind stream for just a single instant, it brings immeasurable and boundless merit that cannot be described in words. Of course, for someone who does not study Buddhism, they might think this sounds a bit mysterious or even mystical. But in reality, that is the nature of truth. When we do not know the value of a precious jewel, we might be just like a farmer or someone else who is poor. If you talk to them about the value of gold, coral, or agate, and diamonds, they might find it a bit mysterious. But in fact, it really isn't like that. That's why so many of us now need to cultivate bodhicitta. When practicing bodhicitta, we should cultivate the bodhicitta of exchanging self for others and the bodhicitta of equality between self for others, bodhicitta valuing others over oneself. It is best to practice these forms of bodhicitta whenever possible in daily life. After you cultivate it, your life and all aspects of yourself will undergo significant changes. So now, as both lay people and as intellectuals, we should practice this kind of bodhicitta, especially in our daily lives. During the process of practice, you will gain many benefits. In Mahayana Buddhism, maybe you used to be someone who wasn't very motivated, but through this kind of practice, in the end, many aspects of your life will be transformed. I remember there was once a truly remarkable woman named Zina, who was the beautiful and beloved daughter of the Russian crown prince, heir to the throne. Her mother was an extremely wealthy person in the United States. She grew up in a very luxurious environment from a young age because of her family, her school, and all other aspects of her life, everything was so good, it was like living in paradise. But in the end, her behavior, especially during the 1960s, under the influence of American hippie culture, she ended up committing all kinds of misdeeds. She drank alcohol, smoked, and engaged in all sorts of impure behaviors. She gradually developed all sorts of various bad habits and behaviors. Over time, eventually, later people believed that although she came from a distinguished and noble family with a long and respected lineage, she was tragically truly beyond saving. Then, just by chance, she met the very famous great master Lama Zopa Rinpoche and his teacher Lama Yeshe. When she met them, perhaps due to karmic connections from her past lives, she almost instantly developed faith in Buddhism, especially in its teachings. She then took refuge and began her practice from Mahayana Buddhism, especially starting with Bodhicitta. She studied in a very thorough and systematic way. After studying, her entire body and mind underwent a complete transformation. Previously, everything she did was selfish and self-serving, and even went against basic ethics and morals. Her actions were all things that people found extremely unpleasant to look at. She engaged in behaviors that violated normal standards. But from that point on, her entire outlook on life and worldview underwent a complete and dramatic transformation. Later, she helped her teacher establish Buddhist centers in 25 countries around the world. Notably, at the same time, there were also many thousands upon thousands of Westerners practicing Buddhism. It is said that she was reportedly the first Western woman to become a Buddhist nun. So in the past, I saw many introductions about her in Western countries. At that time, I thought to myself, actually, many of our intellectuals today simply do not understand some of the principles of Buddhism. There may be several reasons for this lack of understanding. One reason is the language barrier between us. Mahayana Buddhism itself was transmitted from India, then to China, and then to Tibet. But for various reasons along the way, many people have not fully grasped its meaning. Furthermore, some things that people consider to be Buddhist are actually not truly Buddhism. I think that even here, there are few people who believe that so-called Buddhism is something we need to understand. What exactly is Buddhism? In fact, Buddhism is a form of education. It is a kind of education. When we burn incense, worship the Buddha, and perform many good deeds in temples, these are merely Buddhist practices, but they cannot fully represent Buddhism as a whole. If a temple is built to be grand, does that make it Buddhism? It's merely a building of Buddhism. Just like with a university even, if the buildings are grand and impressive on the outside, in reality, it's just a structure within the university. Singing and dancing in the university are actually just cultural programs of the university. But what is the true spirit and core essence of a university? It's the philosophy of education, in essence. And the same goes for Buddhism as well. Therefore, Tibetan Buddhism always has a systematic, sequential, complete approach to listening, contemplation, and practice. To this day, it has been preserved intact. In my opinion, I think this is something that many intellectuals should analyze in the future. Some people now take refuge in Buddhism, but they themselves don't really know what it's about, just circling around the periphery for many years. They haven't studied much, only worship Buddha. In this way, they have not understood the true teachings of Buddhism. If one does not understand the teachings of Buddhism, can they really be considered a Buddhist? It's hard to say. So now I think that in many Han Chinese Buddhist temples, of course, rare temples explain sutras and give teachings, but the most crucial thing is that temples need to have lectures and explanations of the teaching. All the Buddhist research centers at our universities must offer courses on Buddhism, whether it's history, Mahayana, Theravada, or courses on various scriptures and treatises. They should all be included. There is an abundance, an extremely rich collection of, could say, thousands of sutras and treatises, all piled up in our sutra deposit. Especially when I see scripture repositories in the Han regions, I feel something indescribable inside. Why is that? From the Tang, Song, Yuan, and Ming dynasties, there have been so many translators who translated many treatises by eminent Indian monks, and so many of the Buddha's scriptures all just stacked together. It's regrettable. They're already covered in dust on the outside. Inside, there are many treasures, but they're just contents on the pages of books. A lot of the connotation hasn't been truly understood in our hearts. It's like water placed in front of us while we are parched. But if I don't take a sip, how can that water really help? It's very difficult. So now I think whether one is a Buddhist or not, everyone should really study Buddhism. If you study Buddhism, I think no matter what, it's impossible to refute Buddhism with your own wisdom. Since ancient times, even the greatest literary masters have been powerless to do so. I believe that humanity has already entered the 21st century. According to the Buddhist calendar, it should now be the year 2555 since the Buddha's parinirvana. This was calculated in the last meeting of the Buddhist Alliance. There are many different ways to calculate the Buddha's era. Later, a Buddhist council was held in Sri Lanka. If we use this calculation method as the basis, then now it would be the year 2555. Over such a long period of time, Buddhism is the philosophy best able to withstand scrutiny. Let's not talk about anything else just within Buddhism. Later on, the greatest figures in Buddhism, Nagarjuna, Dharmakirti, Chandakirti, Shantideva, and Shantarakshita, the treatises they passed down, if we study them, when we study them, many people might feel lost or confused. Indeed, these concepts are extremely profound. Therefore, when we study these treatises, we personally feel they are incredibly valuable. This value brings an indescribable and profound benefit, a truly significant advantage to the philosophy of human life as a whole. Actually, what are we humans pursuing? Perfection. What else are we pursuing? Happiness. But this happiness cannot be just momentary. Happy today, pain tomorrow, that's not happiness. If I am happy in this life but suffering in the next, that is not how it should be. As human beings, we should possess a certain level of wisdom. If we have wisdom, we should not only think about our own happiness, but also consider the happiness of all beings around us. The scope of this happiness and joy should be expanded to encompass all living beings. This is the first greatness of Buddhism. The second greatness is that we are indeed different from other religions. There is a wealth of theory and scriptures, and they can withstand all kinds of debates. Tibetan Buddhism has always advocated and encouraged debate within monasteries. When you engage in debate, you uncover many truths from the depth of your own wisdom. Such truths, in the end, are not destroyed by wrong views or doubts. They are incredibly and extremely pure and can reveal the true fundamental value inherent in human beings. Confucius also said in the Analects, Wen Ji Bing Bing. What does this mean? It means when our acquired culture and our innate human nature are combined and harmonized, only then it can be considered true human progress or development. When you have already separated yourself from external superficial needs and pursue something illusory and unattainable, if you search for these things excessively, that is not true development. Sometimes everyone here has surely felt this way. What is it that people truly pursue day in and day out? In the end, when you truly leave this world, what have you actually gained? Everyone should take a moment to think about this. In the end, in this vast ocean of life and death, perhaps nothing remains at all. That is why the Buddha, out of great compassion, taught us the Dharma. It is exactly like this. I remember that the Buddha already said this in the Mahasamnipata Sutra. The Buddha ferries beings across the ocean of samsara, speaking the Dharma out of compassion. Because when the Buddha looks at us sentient beings, he sees that we are always immersed in the sea of suffering, birth, aging, sickness, death, confusion, and ignorance. Therefore, out of utmost compassion, he gave us teachings that truly guide us in the right direction. In fact, teachers are very great. But what do teachers teach us? It is just knowledge for this present life. After you graduate, when you step into society, how do you make money? How do you live? How do you contribute to society? It's just some things for this brief present life. Parents are also very compassionate, raising us from childhood, their kindness as great as a mountain. But what do most parents actually teach you in your life? To start a family and establish a career, how to live again, and also some short-term benefits. So just as it is said in the Bodhisattva's way of life, to let sentient beings forever leave the sea of suffering that is samsara. Only the Buddha, with his great compassion, can truly give us such teachings. Apart from this, among all the wise people, Brahmins and scholars in the world, none of them can necessarily explain this to us, at least not directly. This includes celestial beings, immortals, and even the most prestigious kings and ministers. None of them have given us such teachings either. Therefore, in Buddhism, we often say that the kindness of a spiritual teacher surpasses all others. In fact, whether one is a university student or an intellectual, in our word, it is about seeking a spiritual teacher who reveals the transcendent truth. It is truly very important for one's entire life. In our lifetime, perhaps we only have the karmic connection to meet one or two such people. They can bring about a significant change in the course of your whole life. Maybe in your own life, someone gives you a Buddhist scripture, and when you open it, you realize, oh, many of the truths you have been seeking are found within. Or perhaps someone introduces you to a great Mahayana spiritual teacher. From the words of this Mahayana teacher, perhaps you truly and genuinely find the ultimate goal you have been seeking in life. Therefore, I believe that many intellectuals do at times truly become lost and feel quite bewildered. At school, it's all foggy and unclear. And then when you enter society, the knowledge you learned is actually not applicable in the real world. And even when you do use it, you lack sufficient mental preparation. In school, you are very innocent and pure. You feel that the world is very beautiful, that life outside, or human life in general, is extremely joyful. You have these kinds of ideals. But when you actually do enter society, much of the specialized knowledge you learned becomes useless again. And since childhood, at home, you are treated like a princess or a prince, with all your family members and teachers revolving around you, whatever you wanted, they would satisfy. But once you enter society, many things are not as you imagined. No matter where you go in the workplace, or when you enter any group in society, the world you once imagined undergoes a tremendous change. Precisely because of this, many people who are particularly selfish and self-centered every year, so many of them end up committing suicide. So in Buddhism today, we really emphasize two key things to eliminate attachment to self and to eliminate selfishness. Of course, to completely and fundamentally get rid of these is extremely difficult. But we must understand that Buddhism can be described as an ocean of wisdom vast and profound. It's simply impossible to cover it all here in just a few words. However, there are key principles that we must understand. For example, in Buddhism, there's the three principal aspects of the path. The three principal aspects teaches renunciation, bodhicitta, and non-dual wisdom. If you can grasp such simple principles, it's actually like opening the door to a treasure trove. Once you open the door to the treasure, then all the treasures inside can be freely enjoyed by anyone. So we must always remember, it is important to note that our own arrogance and attachment have always been the fundamental causes of harm to ourselves and others since ancient times. The Indian master, Bodhisattva Shantideva, some of you may have studied it before. It is also mentioned in the Bodhisattva's way of life. One's own faults are many, others' virtues are vast. Knowing this, one should cultivate loving others and abandoning self-grasping. This statement is extremely important. If some of our students can understand this truth, they may gain a great deal in their lifetime. Why is that? In the past, we have been self-centered in our pursuits, never wanting to take responsibility for society, nor thinking of repaying the kindness of our parents, nor feeling gratitude toward those who have formed good or bad connections with us, lacking such a noble spirit. Therefore, in our schools, we should have a kind of education for the heart. There should be a kind of noble education, a kind of moral education. This is more important than money, status, or anything else. If a person is truly kind to everyone in their heart, if you have this kind of mindset, perhaps in this world, you may be discriminated against or misunderstood by others, and even abandoned by others. This is possible. But in reality, your sense of responsibility, your altruistic heart will always shine so brightly. So in our daily lives today, we should always strive to have an altruistic heart. Altruism is also the ultimate essence of Mahayana Buddhism. It is indispensable. It is also the central and primary focus around which every discipline in the world revolves. As a teacher, we frequently educate students and impart worldly professional knowledge. Of course, altruistic heart is also essential. But the most crucial thing is how to be a good person. The foundation of being a good person is to be tolerant and be altruistic. If you possess an altruistic heart, it truly becomes much easier. Just as I mentioned earlier, there are actually many methods to cultivate such an altruistic mind, including the practice of great compassion. Some people may think, I should have an altruistic heart. I am very compassionate. I am a very good practitioner. But in reality, that's not the case. In Buddhism, there is a kind of altruistic mind that is cultivated in this way. First, one practices Guru Yoga. Of course, when I mention these terms, some students might not necessarily understand them, but I think that when we seek the truth, we should have the courage to face it in all situations. The original person who first discovered tomatoes thought they were poisonous, but later someone bravely ate one. In the same way, whenever we seek any truth, some special terms or some truths, letting them remain forever in the realm of the unknown is not what a wise person would do. Today, I want to offer everyone this opportunity about this practice. If you feel your compassion and altruism are already sufficient, there is a practice called exchanging self and others meditation. This method of exchanging self and others, when you exhale, you imagine giving away your own happiness, peace, and all your wealth and prosperity. Visualize them as white breath or white energy and begin to breathe them out. And when you inhale, slowly and deeply imagine taking in others suffering, misfortune, troubles, and all kinds of illnesses and obstacles, all of which enter your body in the form of black breath. At this point, some people might feel afraid. They might wonder, if I do this, will I catch other people's diseases? Will I take on other people's pain in various ways? At that moment, the self suddenly emerges. This shows that your attachment to self has not yet been eliminated. In the past, Tibetan Buddhism had a specific practice chart for cutting through this attachment. This practice for cutting through is done similarly. Sometimes practitioners would deliberately go to harsh charnel grounds or sacred mountains, and there they would start digging in holy places or cutting down sacred trees, engaging in actions that disturb or destroy. The Dharma protectors, or Amanusha, became angry, causing hailstorms and thunder. At that moment, you might think, wow, maybe I can't handle this now, and your self-attachment jumps out. When we practice exchanging self for others, you might wonder if it will bring suffering to you. The Buddha also repeatedly spoke about this in the sutras. Maitreya Bodhisattva mentions this in Ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. In fact, this is just a method. In reality, you will not suffer as you imagine. In our world, a teacher helps others every day. On the surface, you might think if someone helps others, isn't that painful for them? But in fact, it is not. It is gradually recognized by society. Little by little, the whole team also comes to acknowledge you. So then we wonder, why don't we have this kind of altruistic mind at all? Of course, for us, the true Mahayana Bodhicitta is indeed quite distant for us. It's not that easy to attain. But if we start with basic altruistic intention, I truly believe that this is the very core essence of Mahayana Buddhism, without a doubt. Of course, if you also possess some wisdom to observe the ultimate reality of all phenomena, actually, this is the easiest. In Mahayana Buddhism, for example, if you study the Madhyamaka middle way, there are various forms of reasoning. Through reasoning, you determine that all things are impermanent, selfless, and empty in nature. This is not something said verbally. It is established with solid logic. You could say it is proven with irrefutable truth. In reasoning, everyone comes to believe in their hearts, oh, the Buddha truly was so great. And the wisdom of those followers who came after the Buddha, indeed, nowadays, so-called academicians, professors, and doctoral advisors have renowned reputations. But when you compare their wisdom to that of Buddha's followers, you should really feel a real difference by yourself. This comes from the wisdom of emptiness. And in terms of the all-encompassing great compassion, it truly is so. Sometimes I think for humanity more than 2,500 years ago, to have such a noble spirit was truly extremely rare, especially when Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in the world. Shakyamuni Buddha was born as the prince of King Shuddhodana. And at that time, the entire social structure of India consisted of royalty, the Brahmin caste, the noble caste, and also some lower castes. At that time, discrimination between castes was extremely severe. But the Buddha did not discriminate against anyone because of his royal state. He regarded himself as an ordinary person and went to serve among groups such as the Sikh and those considered especially lowly. When we talk about human equality, gender equality, and world peace, the true ideals, even in the 21st century, we have not yet reached some of the ideals that the Buddha spoke of. I'm not just boasting to you about this point. You should use your own wisdom and an inquisitive perspective to actively seek out the ultimate teachings of Mahayana Buddhism. In scriptures such as the Vinaya Sutra and the Dirgha Agama, even at that time, human thought had already matured to such an extent. We all tend to think that in ancient times, people's thinking was very outdated and society was not progressive back then. Indeed, in terms of material civilization, there is a world of difference. If we compare it to today's era of such rapid technological development, we can say that there were certain differences in material aspect. However, in terms of thought, especially compassion and wisdom, what is most crucial in Buddhism, as I often believe, is wisdom and compassion in these two important aspects. They should surpass much of humanity's most advanced thing. So, regarding these issues, I think many intellectuals must use their sharpest intellect to explore and truly understand the profound meaning within. It is also mentioned in the history of the transmission of the Dharma treasury that the Dharma is cooling, removing the heat of afflictions. Buddha Dharma is very cooling and pure. It can sweep away the burning afflictions of our minds. I remember in the Sutra of Mindfulness of the True Dharma, it is also stated that through hearing, because of wisdom, one burns all the trees of afflictions. Through the wisdom gained from hearing, we can burn away the dense forest of wrong views and afflictions in this world. Nowadays, people's thoughts and discursive thinking are especially severe. People are caught in greed, anger, and ignorance, chasing fame and material gain. Every day, they pursue illusory and unreal goals, staying busy day and night. But no matter how incredibly busy a person is, what do you ultimately gain from all of this? Honestly, there's really nothing at all. Crystal clear lies a single path, yet tens of thousands refuse to cultivate it. Didn't we say before, we are all very clear about this, giving hundreds and thousands of reasons. We refuse to cultivate. By the 22nd century, what will everyone here have become? Everyone knows this very well. By the time we eventually reach the later part of the 21st century, sometime in the future, everyone present will have entered the underworld and left this world. When you leave this world, is it really, as few treatises say, when someone dies, is it like a lamp going out? Not at all. We truly have ample reason. So what is most crucial right now? It's that many people do not believe in cause and effect, do not believe in reincarnation. This has had a tremendous impact on the whole of society. Such influence has caused significant and lasting catastrophic damage to our entire outlook on life and system of value. Many people think that as long as they have some fun, that's enough. As long as these short decades pass, that's all there is. A lot of people's thinking is restless and simplistic. But in reality, it's not like this at all. This kind of thinking is far too simplistic. There's really not much difference between this and the animals of the world. In the past, Sakyapandita spoke about this in his maxims. If people only seek some food and some pleasure, and apart from that, have no hope for liberation, then there's really no difference between them and animals. This is not what I said. As we know, wise people from several hundred years ago have already said this. What these wise people said was not nonsense. It's just that we ourselves are simply unaware of it. Many of the young people sitting here today, the environment you grew up in, the education you received, are actually just realism, just a temporary way of living in the human and heavenly realm. You might think that after finishing your studies, the knowledge you've gained is the most perfect in the world, but that's a mistake. In fact, we have yet to encounter many higher, deeper, and broader levels of knowledge. Many people think, I'm a university student, I must be really great. Their ego keeps getting bigger and bigger, but their wisdom does not grow accordingly. Indeed, after you enter university, all sorts of messy and chaotic knowledge start flooding in. Knowledge truly beneficial to society, families, and oneself. A lot of knowledge has over time been forgotten. When entering society, people feel out of place. Many things are difficult. They complain constantly, blaming fate and others every day. Society, unfair work, unfair parents, not treat them well. But they lack gratitude. This is the prevailing mindset in society today. I'm not slandering the truth here. This is something we can all see for ourselves. At this time, it is indeed, just as Dr. Toynbee once said, truly, that saving humanity in the 21st century depends on Confucian, Mencian, and Mahayana Buddhist thought. Indeed, Mahayana Buddhism is indispensable to our society today. If the selfless spirit of dedication and giving found in Mahayana Buddhism is absent, and everyone is desperately striving only for their own goals and ignore those around you, then in that case, you might not even care about those around you, including your own parents or your teachers. I think nowadays, many students, after graduating from university, don't realize how many teachers at school have devoted themselves to you day and night. Recently, in my discussions with many professors at Zhejiang University, some of them truly are engineers of the human soul, and they genuinely live up to that title. For decades, they have worked tirelessly, even forgetting to eat or sleep, teaching and striving for the long-term future goals of their students. Such dedication and work are not only sacred, but also truly great. In my own years of engaging and interacting with many students over time, I feel that the most meaningful thing in the world is teaching and passing on knowledge. However, nowadays, many ungrateful college students, after leaving school, perhaps many of them don't even bother to say hello. Some who are a bit more grateful might at least say, "Hello, sir." They don't realize how much of the knowledge in their minds was passed on by their teachers. In fact, we should repay even the smallest kindness with the greatest gratitude. Personally, I am deeply grateful for the spiritual teachers who have imparted the Dharma to me. And in the worldly sense, this includes my elementary school teachers, my middle school teachers. Every time I think about the little bit of wisdom and knowledge I have today, none of it came easy. It was all earned through their hard work, their youth, and their precious time. Because they tirelessly nurtured us in this way, I have even just a little bit of knowledge today in my heart. This is something I have always believed. And it's not just a belief in my actual actions. I always try to recognize kindness and return it. This is my principle. So nowadays, many college students really feel as if just getting into college is already a great achievement. They don't realize that they will still have to face all kinds of pressures in the world. At this time, the ungrateful, I'm afraid their future may not necessarily be bright. So I think that some of the important teachings of Mahayana Buddhism are still very much needed in today's society. And this need is not just something I pay lip service to. Anyone can talk about it, making it sound wonderful. Everyone can say these things. But if you truly benefit from it, deep down in your heart, others can also gain the same benefit. Right now, whether in Han regions or Tibetan regions, many people are studying Mahayana Buddhism. For example, those who study the Bodhisattva's way of life or other Mahayana scriptures and treatises, you could say it's a big difference between those who have studied and those who haven't. They become like two truly completely different people. The difference is enormous. Therefore, we should also make sure to study and learn in this way, just as it has been suggested. If we study like this, there should be a significant transformation. For some people, certain karmic conditions from previous lives may have ripened. When your conditions are truly ripe and ideal, you can quickly discover and find your true home. I remember that in the past, the three-card monk was also the great Master Kuiji in history. In fact, Master Kuiji was an ancient person in a thatched hut in the mountains, who was found when Master Tang Xuanzang was on his way to India to obtain scriptures. This ancient person had grass growing on his head and body, so it was impossible to tell whether he was a person or a rock. He touched him and found that his heart was still beating. He thought maybe he was an experienced meditation master, so he tried to wake him up. After being awakened, he began to come out of his meditative state. He then told Xuanzang, I have been waiting for Shakyamuni Buddha to appear in the world. Later, Xuanzang said, Shakyamuni Buddha has already appeared more than 1,000 years ago. But he didn't know it because he had already entered into a state of meditation. In that case, I will wait for Maitreya Buddha to be born. But if you want, it will still take over 4 billion years, a very long time to wait. You would better be reborn. When I return from India, we can spread the Buddha's teachings together. Later, he planned to be reborn as a royal prince. But in the end, he was not reborn into the royal family, but into the home of a high-ranking minister. He indulged in sensual pleasures. But later, Xuanzang realized that he was the reincarnation and persuaded him to become a monk. At first, he was completely unwilling, but then the emperor issued an order. When the order was given, he said, I have 3 requests. I want 3 carriages, one filled with beautiful women, one with fine wine, and one with gold and silver treasures. These 3 things are indispensable to me. If my requests are met, I can become a monk. Later, he reluctantly went to the monastery. When he arrived at the monastery, he heard the sound of the monastery bell, the gong of the bell being struck. At that moment, his spiritual nature awakened, and he was moved to tears. Then he abandoned all and became a monk. He is known as Master Kuiji. If there is a few karmic ties in past lives, some of the teachers and the students here, it's possible when you go to a monastery to listen to the Dharma, or when certain conditions arise, you may be moved to tears. In fact, this is the fruition of karmic ties from previous lives. So, in this world, when many conditions ripen, sometimes just a little nudge from the side can immediately rekindle your virtuous roots. Such karmic conditions do exist. But regardless, for some people, we don't ask them to become monks. I once read a book written by a Frenchman named Mathieu. His father was a philosopher, and he became a monk. After ordaining, he engaged in dialogue and exchanges with his father. Later, he wrote The Monk and the Philosopher, also known as Buddhism and the Dialogue with Western Thought. Actually, this book already discusses these points. As an intellectual, how does he face the world in his daily life? When he studies the Dharma and awakens his spiritual disposition, how does he approach the principles of life or the truth in all aspects are things we should understand. In short, I hope that everyone present here today, many of you in your daily life should have a broad and open mindset and an attitude of inclusiveness. I heard that the emblem of Zhejiang University is the seeking truth eagle. You should truly possess a really soaring and uplifting spirit. Since ancient times, many famous figures like Fang Zikai have also been closely connected with Buddhism. Throughout history, many masters, including Su Dongpo and Master Hongyi. In this place, many intellectuals and eminent monks also have certain connections. This is what people call a land of outstanding people, and there should be a special auspicious connection here. I hope that each of us should also have a truly very open and free mindset in our daily life. I heard that Zhejiang University doesn't have a real gate people, can come in from all directions. This is an inevitable trend in the development of humanity. It should be said that only with openness can be development. The cultures of the East and West, especially Mahayana Buddhist culture, there should be even more exchanges in various aspects. Why is that? Any theory or idea that is beneficial to human society is worth promoting, worth advocating, and worth encouraging people to explore. But for anything that doesn't benefit human society or our mental well-being, I think we should not engage with such knowledge at this time. With this in mind, I can confidently say that Mahayana Buddhism will bring incomparable benefits to our entire society. So, if I were to sum it up in simple terms for you today, I would say this. The main point can be captured in just a few clear words, making it easy to understand for everyone. In fact, the beautiful West Lake in Hangzhou has nurtured Zhejiang University with its glorious century-long history, as well as Lingyin Temple, an ancient monastery with a 1,000-year legacy. There are intellectuals and devoted lay people from all corners of the country, making it a lively place with many visitors. Everyone should truly have a heart of inclusiveness and altruism. Only in this way, I believe that our world become a little more beautiful. At the same time, it will also bring a deep sense of peace and lasting harmony to our beautiful Westlake. I think that's really all I have to say for today.